The cold came down like a wall that night, the kind that turned breath into fog before it left your mouth, that made your bones ache just walking from the car to the door. He pulled his coat tighter, keys jingling in numb fingers, when the street lamp caught something small and still in the snow. At first he thought it was a bundle of rags, then he thought, kitten, stray probably, left behind or lost. He'd seen it before in neighborhoods like this, people moving out, leaving animals to fend for themselves. But as he knelt down, the wind parting the snow around the tiny body, he saw the markings, tufted ears, a spotted coat, dense and wild, paws too broad, a face too angular. Not a kitten, a bobcat. His heart kicked hard in his chest. The animal wasn't moving. Its eyes were half closed, frost clinging to its whiskers. He didn't know how long it had been there, but he knew what another hour in this cold would mean. He didn't think, he just moved. Coat off, wrapped around the small body, arms cradling it close as he stumbled back toward his house, through the wind that screamed down the empty street. Inside, the warmth hit him like a slap. He laid the bobcat on the kitchen table under the overhead light, hands shaking as he grabbed towels from the linen closet, a heating pad from the back of the bathroom cabinet. The animal's body was stiff, cold as stone. Its breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. He worked slowly, methodically, warming the towels in the dryer, wrapping them gently around the small frame, adjusting the heating pad to low, checking every few minutes for signs of hypothermia rebound. He told himself it was temporary. Just stabilize it. Get it through the night. Tomorrow, he'd call a wildlife rehab center. Someone trained for this. Someone who knew what they were doing. He wasn't that person. He was just a man who worked too many hours, and came home to a quiet house, and a cat who greeted him at the door every evening without fail. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. He sat at the table, chin resting on his folded arms, watching the rise and fall of the bobcat's chest. Slowly, so slowly, the breathing deepened. The stiffness eased. A paw twitched. Then another. The bobcat's eyes cracked open, unfocused and cloudy, before closing again. He exhaled a breath. He didn't know he'd been holding. That's when he heard the soft padding of feet on hardwood. Milo appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim glow of the hallway nightlight. The orange tabby stood there for a long moment, head tilted, ears forward. The man expected a puffed tail, a retreat into the safety of the bedroom. Milo had never been aggressive, but he'd also never been reckless. He knew the difference between prey and predator. He knew when something didn't belong, but Milo didn't. He approached slowly, cautiously, his body low but not fearful. He circled the table once, sniffing the air, studying the small wild creature wrapped in towels. Then he hopped up onto the chair beside the man, stretched his neck forward, and touched his nose to the bobcat's frozen ear. The man froze. Milo began to groom, slow, deliberate licks across the bobcat's ears, its forehead, the delicate fur around its eyes. The rough texture of his tongue worked methodically, warming, cleaning, coaxing life back into the tiny wild thing that should have terrified him. The bobcat didn't stir, didn't flinch, just lay there, breathing, as Milo settled beside it, tucking his body close, offering warmth the heating pad couldn't provide. The man sat in the kitchen, bathed in the hum of the refrigerator and the soft sound of purring, and watched something he couldn't explain, something that defied every instinct he thought he understood. Milo wasn't curious. He wasn't cautious. He was protective, devoted, as if he'd been waiting for this exact moment his entire life. The man rubbed his eyes, exhaustion pulling at him, but he didn't move, didn't dare disturb what was happening in front of him. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, a house cat groomed a wild predator with the tenderness of a mother caring for her young. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question began to form, a question that would follow him through every day that came after. Why? Why would a domestic cat, safe and comfortable, and utterly removed from the wild, instantly adopt a creature that should have triggered every alarm in his small domesticated body? What instinct, what ancient memory, what inexplicable thread of connection could explain this? He didn't have an answer, not that night, but as Milo curled tighter around the bobcat, purring low and steady, the man knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be just one night. Morning came soft and pale through the kitchen window. Dear. The man woke with his head still on the table, neck stiff, the heating pad now cool beneath his hand. He lifted his head slowly, blinking against the light, and stopped. Milo was wrapped completely around the bobcat, body curved, tail tucked, front paws draped protectively over the wild kitten's back. The bobcat's chest rose and fell with deeper, stronger breaths now, its tiny paws stretched outward, claws flexing instinctively, testing the air. It was alive, truly alive. The man exhaled, relief flooding through him. He reached for his phone to search for wildlife rehab centers, but hesitated. Milo's eyes were open now, watching him with that steady, unblinking gaze cats give when they know something you don't. The days that followed unraveled every plan he'd made. He tried to create distance, set up a separate space in the spare room with blankets and a heat lamp. But every time he placed the bobcat there, Milo would appear within minutes, meowing insistently at the closed door, until the man let him in. Then Milo would settle beside the bobcat, grooming, purring, refusing to leave. The bobcat began to respond, tiny chirps and mews when Milo approached, head bumps that grew bolder each day, clumsy attempts to groom Milo back, its rough tongue working across the tabby's ears with surprising gentleness. Milo brought toys, a crinkled ball, a feather on a string. He'd drop them beside the bobcat's bed, meowing, until the wild kitten batted at them weakly. When the bobcat cried, a sharp, lonely sound that echoed through the house, Milo answered immediately, rushing to its side, curling close, soothing it back to sleep. The man watched it all with a growing sense of wonder and dread. The bobcat grew stronger. It began eating solid food, raw chicken at first, then small pieces of turkey. Its legs steadied, its eyes sharpened. It started exploring the house with tentative steps, Milo trailing behind like a patient teacher. The bobcat learned to play gently, to slow blink, to press its forehead against Milo's in greeting, but it also climbed the curtains with wild precision, pounced on shadows with predatory focus, stared out the window at birds with an intensity that didn't belong in a living room. The man knew what was happening. This wasn't just recovery, this was something else, something unplanned, something beautiful and impossible and entirely out of his control. He stood in the kitchen one evening, watching Milo and the bobcat curled together on the couch, and realized the truth he'd been avoiding. This wasn't temporary anymore, and he had no idea what came next. The bobcat grew fast, too fast. Within weeks, its paws had doubled in size, its legs lengthened, muscles coiling beneath spotted fur that grew thicker, wilder. The playful swats that once made Milo purr, now sent him sliding across the hardwood floor. The bobcat didn't mean harm, it was just stronger now, built for something the walls of this house could never contain. But Milo never flinched, never hissed, never stopped trusting. The man made the call he'd been dreading. The wildlife rehab center confirmed what he already knew. The bobcat was healthy, strong, ready for the next phase. They talked about soft release protocols, transitioning back to the wild, giving the animal the life it was meant to have. He hung up and stared at Milo, who sat on the windowsill beside the bobcat, both of them watching the yard together. How do you break a bond like that? He built an enclosure in the backyard, large, sturdy, filled with platforms and branches, and hiding spaces. A halfway point between the house and the forest that pressed against the edge of his property. The bobcat explored it with fearless curiosity, stalking insects, climbing to the highest perch, scanning the tree line with eyes that saw things the man couldn't. But every evening, as the sun dipped low, the bobcat would press its body against the glass door that led back inside, watching, waiting, looking for Milo. And Milo would be there, on the other side, paw pressed to the glass, mellowing softly. The man stood between them, heart heavy, with a question that had no easy answer. Was this right? Returning the bobcat to the wild, was that kindness or cruelty? Was he honoring nature or breaking something sacred? The bobcat belonged out there, in the trees, in the instinct and freedom of the wilderness. But Milo had given it something the wild never could: safety, love, family. The stronger the bobcat became, the harder the decision grew. He watched it one morning, perched on the tallest platform, staring at the forest with longing in its eyes. Then it turned, looked back at the house, and chirped,
a sound caught between two worlds. The man closed his eyes. Spring was coming, the forest was waking, and soon he would have to let go of both the bobcat and the illusion that love alone could keep something wild from leaving. Spring arrived with soft rain and the smell of earth turning green again. The bobcat was ready. The man could see it in the way it moved, confident, powerful, every instinct honed. The wildlife team arrived at dawn with carriers and calm voices, walking him through the process one last time. Soft release, monitored, safe. He and Milo walked the enclosure together one final time. The bobcat approached them both, pressing its forehead against Milo's, then against the man's hand. A goodbye neither of them had words for. Then, with a glance back that felt like a question, the bobcat turned and walked into the open forest, under the watchful eyes of the rehab staff. The house felt different after that. Milo wandered the rooms crying softly, short, plaintive sounds that echoed in the empty spaces where the bobcat used to sleep. He sat at the glass door for hours, watching the yard, waiting for something that didn't come. The man tried everything. New toys, extra attention, but Milo's eyes stayed fixed on the tree line, searching. The man wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. 3 weeks passed. Then he checked the trail camera he'd mounted near the edge of the woods, something the rehab team had suggested to monitor the bobcat's adjustment. He scrolled through the footage. Deer, a fox. Then the bobcat stood at the forest's edge, bigger now, healthier than ever, coat gleaming in the dappled sunlight. It was staring directly at the house, and in the audio, faint but unmistakable, 2 soft chirps recorded in response to Milo's distant cries from the porch. The man's breath caught. That evening, he opened the back door. Milo stepped onto the porch, ears forward, body tense with recognition. The bobcat emerged from the shadows, not all the way, not into the yard, but close enough for Milo to walk to the edge of the deck. Close enough for their noses to touch through the space between wild and home. They stayed like that for a long moment. No words, no explanations, just 2 creatures who'd defied every rule to love each other, acknowledging what they'd always known. Some bonds don't need proximity to survive. Then the bobcat stepped back, melted into the trees, and was gone. Milo returned to the house, calmer now. The crying stopped. He still watched the woods sometimes, but differently, not with longing, with peace. The man stood in the doorway, watching the forest that had taken back what always belonged to it, and whispered into the quiet. He stayed only one night, but he left a bond that lasted a lifetime.